watercolor students. Now that everybody's materials have arrived, we'll be ready to transfer the first two projects. And we'll be able to work on them simultaneously and set up the palette first, but I wanted to go over the first transfer. It's the same for all our projects. Step one is sketch paper. It gets easier when your sketch paper is bigger. You just don't have to tape paper together. So step one is drawing it out like we did, the measurements that are going to be on half of a paper. And then the scales will be on the other side of this project one. The scale measurements are already on the video, and these measurements were already on the video. The scales we don't have to trace because you're just going to use a yardstick. Scales are easy to measure out, but this one was pretty complicated. So I want to go over the transfer for this. Of course, we could take the yellow and just directly put it here and go over this with pen, skipping the step. You can always skip the step, but the problem is then you don't have that transparent tracing paper mock-up. So if this gets messed up or spilled on or whatever, you have that tracing paper one instead of this. So it's a little bit easier, cleaner. So of course the tracing paper is too small. So all we have to do is take two pieces together until it covers this area. And it never hurts to line it up, just so. And tape it together. You can even do this, like tape a whole bunch together at the beginning of when you get your stuff so that it's there and you don't have to worry about it every time. Or you can just get bigger tracing paper. It's just expensive, and I figure better spend our money on the carbon than on a bigger sheet of tracing when you're never going to use 50 or 100 sheets, and this is really reasonable. Alright, so basically I want to trace this before I get to the paper. I want to set aside my good paper, and now that we have all those weird marks and everything, we can get rid of them. Before I start doing that, I always want to tape it down wherever I am so that it doesn't move. Because if things move, and I always leave a corner like that, just so I can tape it. Very similar to the torn edge idea, is that things are taped down and I know where the corners actually are. I'm going to use Scotch tape and make it so it doesn't rip up. The more time, basically it's like anything, the more time you set up, get your materials, chill, you know, it's going to end up better than just sort of throwing it together. You don't want to be rushed. Now, if you don't have a compass, because most compasses are just horrific, they're terrible, they don't work, they have that point thing on the end with a little pencil, and they're cheap, and the only good compasses are the fancy ones, and that's like 20 bucks. So instead of that, we're going to use anything that matches that size. That's better, I think. This is a little too small. I'm going to use this. We're just going to try to get it so that it lines up. We have to get it right in the middle to make it look good. Some of these are going to go off the edge, and that's absolutely fine. We just wanted to get it as close to symmetrical and clean and neat as possible, and that makes it go off the edge a little because the size of this area. Remember though, the big ones, there's only 3. So if you use something, only use it for the 3, and the yellow is at the top always. If you have a good compass, that's way better, but this will do. I don't know if that's going to fit on there. I don't think it does, but okay, that's done. And then this is good for this. These are going to be my secondaries. Good thing is once we have all these transferred and all the first project transferred and second project, then it's just a matter of really starting to get to know the materials and some techniques. The middle's gonna be a neutral, which is mud. Never, ever, 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 ever use black on your color wheel in any way, shape, or form, and never try to match something because it looks a certain way on the internet or it looks like a color and you're trying to match it. Just always go by the instructions and you'll be totally fine. It's just a lot cleaner not having all those marks. And if they look a little off when you go to transfer them, you can still doctor them up a little bit. Make sure these two go off the sides. A lot of people go, oh, and then they put it there, and then it looks totally weird. You still have to center it around that point, and the point is going off the edge. So make sure you don't try to jam it in there. They're supposed to go off the edge. It's not about fitting them in, it's about making sure they're all there in terms of hue. Okay. These are my tertiaries, which are the hyphenated colors. And we're going to label all this on the wheel and on the palette. Alright, that's it. So now you have this so that you can redo the project. Almost everyone I've ever taught watercolor to has to redo their wheel at least 2-3 times by the end of the semester. You can redo any project at any time as your skill set develops because it's just so much better to redo because things go wrong, and that's the beauty of it, is you can just reach for your tracing paper version and there it is. I'm going to divide this paper right off the bat, lightly in pencil. This is my scales, this is my wheel, this is 15 by 20 paper, which means this is 10, and since I don't have a T-square small enough to fit here, you guys should have a T-square because it's on the list. The great thing about that is you don't need to make 2 dots. You don't have to worry about getting it crooked because yardsticks and T-squares are not designed to connect lines, believe it or not. They're just for measurements. But this is what I have. With this camera up here, my whole table would get knocked over with the T-squares that I have. They're huge. But see, you want to split this up. That way you know how this is going to fit in there. Make sure the big one is on the top. And if you measure, if you call it Y for yellow, that's the key. People tend to put yellow in the wrong place. Even on some of the wheel examples I found on the internet, they're in the wrong place. Just in our case, yellow on the top, right up here. Just remember that. We're just going to center it in here. And you'll see that one side goes off the edge and the other side goes off the edge. And that's okay. In fact, I'm going to divide this again just because I didn't trace. Actually, let me do this because I should have done this. I should have done. See, I had the paper crooked. I want to kind of center this now. And this is my halfway point. And this is my, that's good enough. So now I know that if I go over here, and this is now 10, I can just do a little mark for 5, that's the middle, and then I can do a little mark down, this one's 15, so I can do 7.5, right in the middle. So I know this is the center right there. And then I can take my tracing paper, line it in the center, and then make sure it hits the 7.5 mark that I just made right here. And that's how I line it up. And that's the other good thing about tracing paper is you can see through. That looks even. I don't know why I did that crooked. I'll do it straightforward. It'd be a lot better. I'm gonna just continue this mark here so I don't get messed up. Make sure that's broken in half, symmetrical. since I did a weird thing. All right. There's, duh. Okay, this is better. All I have to do is superimpose this, because this one I did that way. I tell you, it really helps to have a regular table and not a round one. It's just that the light is so much better out here. There we go. So now I can tape it down. Now I'm good. Easy peasy. Okay. Cool. Now I'm done with that. Slide this in. See, this one doesn't matter as much because very few of these are even touching the sides. As long as this is taped down so that when I'm done it's symmetrical, I'm good. Best thing to do with this is reuse those and a pen. If you trust your hand enough, you can go like this. The main thing on this project is that we're going to stay within the lines without any streaks. It's called even wash. See, it takes too long to do that evenly, so I'm just going to do how I did. See, here I already have the circle, it's just easier. So and then you're going to have your template anytime you need it to redo, and there's plenty of paper for you to redo any amount of projects that you want throughout the semester. The other thing that will be important is to have scratch paper, so you can have a couple sheets designated for scratch paper. You always want to test everything first before you paint on your picture, and you never want to use the back ever of a sheet of watercolor paper unless you're literally using it for a drawing or something like that. You can't use it for paint. It's not actually watercolor paper on the back. This is kind of self-explanatory here. So on the right side, we're just going to make the scales as I already demonstrated, and then you'll be ready to go. And you'll get used to the carbon paper and how much pressure you need to press on there, and what comes out on the other side. And as long as you keep switching pens, switching colors, even if it's just pencil to pen, you'll always know what you went over already, and then you won't have to reattach everything. That's the worst, when you miss something and then you have to try to get the paper back where it was to redo. So I can scan all this and go, okay, the pen is on everything, so I did it all. You could do it with a red pen, a green pen, whatever, just to see. All right, now you probably can't see this, and that's the goal. It went off the edge, it went off the edge, that's perfectly fine, but it should be a faint yellow mark. Always with watercolor, if you can't see it, that's the goal. Like you can barely make it out, that's really perfect for the artist. Other people won't be able to make it out. That's why it's hard to demonstrate watercolor, because it's such a visual up close thing, but hopefully you can see the yellow. And so every project you do, you're going to end up with a thumbnail, a larger version, a transfer onto carbon, and then a carbon on top of tracing, etc., so that you always have another option for redoing it. So go ahead and do that, and on the right make your scales.